guys. Hope you're doing okay. I know you're busy with assignments, so I just encourage you, keep at it, keep supporting and encouraging each other. And I want to encourage you just by saying, just now I really struggled with the assignment stages of finding it really difficult to make time for God. But just encourage you that rather than thinking you don't have time for Him, that this is a special opportunity in which you can really connect with Him in a different and new way. And I hope you experience that this time. Well, a wonderful psalm we're looking at this week is Psalm 51. And a couple of comments on the title. I love the titles, even though it's a little bit nerdy. You've got three aspects of this title here. There's a musical note, which is to the choir master, which shows, again, that it was originally probably intended to be used in sung worship with a congregation. And perhaps this was a corporate song of repentance or confession they had together originally. Second, we have this note that it was to David, or and we've said this before, it could be for David or by David. Most commentators think it was written by David. I'm not sure. It could mean it was a tribute to him or it's connected to him in some way. And then finally you've got another connection to David, but this comes in terms of a narrative title which talks about it being referring to the time when Nathan the prophet challenged David about his sin with Bathsheba. So just worth a couple of comments about that. First of all, again, you might notice that there's no specifics in the actual psalm itself. It doesn't mention David or Uriah or Bathsheba or anything like that. It's very general. And it could be that this psalm was sort of associated with the story of David at a later date. But some people do think it was originally written about that situation. Could be either. There's arguments for and against that. I think it's general. The benefit of having a general psalm is that we can read our own situation into it as well. So that's, again, it's what's deliberately vague. I would encourage you to read anyway the chapters about David and Bathsheba, and that's found in 2 Samuel 11 to 12. It's really interesting to read and then read this psalm next to it. But to the psalm itself, got a few things to say about that. It's clearly a lament and complaint psalm. Large emphasis on confession and forgiveness. And I would just direct you to the first couple of verses as a way into the psalm. So verse 1, for example, says, "Have mercy on me." This is the ESV, English Standard Version, one of the most popular versions of the Bible. "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love, according to your abundant mercy." The ESV mentions the word mercy twice in this first verse. But actually they're two different words in the Hebrew, so I'm not going to try and bore you with lots of original language chat, but it's quite helpful, I think, to see that. You'll see the point I'm making. The first mercy in this verse is more accurately to show favour or kindness to me, or be generous. And the emphasis is on me, the writer of the psalm, their need for kindness or mercy. The emphasis on the second mercy in this line is on God, but God's mercy, his loving nature. And so right away a big theme emerges in this psalm. There's a relationship between me, or the speaker, and between God. And this relationship is defined by the following. I have a need. I'm in a difficult situation. There's something about me that means there's a problem. I've created a problem between myself and God, an offence or an injustice, and I need favour. I need generosity to deal with that. On the other hand, we read that God will choose to deal with me not on the basis of my failure, but on the basis of his loving and generous character. That's the essence of this psalm, God's loving and generous character in my failure. And so this is illustrated best by looking at two sort of groups of words in the first couple of verses here. I went to home and nam. It really brings out the dynamic of this. And the first one is this, and it refers to the second use of that word, mercy. And that in the Hebrew it's raham. And the English Bibles usually translate this as mercy or compassion. So with mercy or compassion, the second word is chesed, which means steadfast or loyal love. And the interesting thing about these words is they're both words that can be translated very generally as love. They're love words. They're synonyms, or even better, they're nuances about God's love. So we have one mini group of words based around the theme of God's love. The second group of words in verses 1 and 2 is another mini set, and it's this. It's based around the concept of sin. So first of all, you've got transgressions, which are pesha. You've got iniquity, which is avon. and kata, which is the word just for sin. And they're slightly nuanced. One refers to transgression's a bit of a rebellious attitude or a violation. Iniquity is a bit more like guilt, and it can mean actually the act, a guilty act, a proclaimed sentence, or the feeling of having done something wrong, or a punishment. And kata is just more like a generic idea of sin. But it's interesting in that it's used in verse 7, not just as the act of sin, but also as the way of dealing with sin. So I think it's used sometimes as the word purged in verse 7. It's the same word. It's both sin and the way of dealing with sin. So it just emphasizes that it's something that has a consequence, something that must be paid or atoned for. And it actually means the thing that atones for that act as well, like the thing that covers that sin. So the point of saying all this, that we've got another mini group of words which mean various, they're synonyms, mean very virtually the same thing. And we're not to focus necessarily on the differences here, but on the fact that this idea of sin is multifaceted. It has different nuances. And this just underlines the fact that sin has an effect on our whole lives. It touches every area of our lives. It's mixed in, it has different faces. And that's helpful in just reminding us that it's not just one set of prohibited acts. That's not what sin is, like a list of rules that we shouldn't break. It's actually more about the heart motives. It's about the attitudes, and it's about the consequences that come from that. And not only that, it's both things that we do ourselves and also things that we are done to us. We're at the same time victims of sin and perpetrators of sin. So in short, it's kind of the brokenness that comes in a world, or with a world, that's estranged from God, its creator. It's something that's in the air, and it prompts us to feel and do and act out things which are against God's good design for his creation. And even when we ourselves aren't necessarily doing anything wrong, it's crept in, it sours our experience of life, and it spreads into the rest of creation. So we have these two groups of words, the mercy, steadfast love on one hand, and you've got transgression, iniquity, and sin on the other hand. And all these are used to show that we have a desperate need that God is full of patient and compassionate love towards us and deals with us on that basis. In case you're thinking I've made all of this up, or I've read too much into it, then I want to point you to another passage, and this is Exodus 34, 4-7, and you'll see that this isn't just a new idea in one sort of isolated part of the Bible. And see if you can pick up on any of the familiar words and themes here. So it says this: So Moses cut 2 tablets of stone like the first, and he rose early in the morning and went up unto Mount Sinai. And as the Lord commanded him, he took in his hand 2 tablets of stone. The Lord descended in the cloud and stood there with him, and proclaimed the name of the Lord. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children, to the 3rd and the 4th generation. Did you notice the words used? Love, merciful and faithful, steadfast love. Exactly the same words. Sin, iniquity, transgression, and just the word sin. Exactly the same words. Again, they're all there. And this passage is given in the context of God giving the law to his people. And that law forms the basis of a covenant relationship. And note that it fully anticipates that as weak human beings, this relationship will be affected by sin. So you may think that Christians are always banging on about sin. It's so negative, it's so judgmental. Why can't we focus on the kind of positive things in life, on the good things in the world? However, the Bible makes it really clear that whilst good and beauty remain in the world, and that humanity is full of goodness and potential, that it would be dishonest to say that, to ignore the Bible's teachings about sin. It basically says that our whole experience of reality is based on this intrusion into the world. Something so serious that its very force of it destroys and warps life. It brings pain and death and misery. It means that every smile is tinged with sorrow and sadness, and there's a looming shadow over the whole of life. It tells us about something that's lost and tells about what could have been but isn't there anymore. So sin looms large over all of life, and it has consequences we can't just brush off as the harsh rhetoric of Bible-waving fanatics. And we can see this in this very passage here. It says it gnaws into the third and the fourth generation. It has consequences. That's what the Passion Exodus says. And we ourselves know that that's true just from the troubled past and the current patterns of our own lives and our own families. But it's fascinating that even in this passage here, even though that's the truth that it says about sin, there's good news. It says that God will keep his steadfast love to thousands. And actually this literally means thousands of generations. So you compare that, the sin having an impact on the third and fourth generation, but God's kindness have an impact on thousands of generations. It's amazing. So from the very start of the Bible, the story of the Bible, God has promised a love that will deal with the problem of sin, and it will do it in a way which will show that his love is more than a match for the destructive power of sin. So back to Psalm 51. I think God shows his incredible love to us in the way that he deals with sin. Most of the psalm is actually about how God deals with sin. And I take two things to notice this. There's something that we can't do or we don't do, and one thing that we do. So we can't deal with sin ourselves. On one hand, it's always God who deals with sin. He's the one that removes impurity and disorder and chaos from his creation. He's committed to taking sin out of his creation, and he's especially committed to dealing with sin in us, and we see this in the way that he forgives and cleanses us and even removes the desire to sin. We all see that in the psalm. However, there is something that we can offer to God, and it's this: to confess and to ask. That's the true offering that we bring to God. It's not a ritual offering for sin. That's only something that God can do himself. And in fact, that's who Christ is. It's God making that offering for sin that we couldn't make for ourselves. However, there is a genuine offering that we can bring to God. And it's the offering of a contrite and a broken heart, a broken and contrite spirit to God you will not despise. The spirit who comes to God asking and confessing. And that's what we see the writer doing all the way through this psalm. And it's what we see God responding to. And so when we do this, we can be sure that God will use every resource he has to do whatever it takes to ensure that that relationship of love is not broken. It's what this psalm is all about. So God's nature is more than generous. In the face of our failure, it's full of astonishing loyalty and compassionate love. And this psalm is a meditation on God's love for us in the face of sin. It's a reassurance to us, his people, that he is committed to us with a passionate and slow-burning love. So I hope that's helpful and it gives you a handle on what this psalm's all about. Quick suggestion, given the theme, there's a great song that we sing at church from time to time called His Mercy is More. And maybe it's a song that one of you can get on YouTube, or you might have it on your phone, and you can share the screen and play it and just listen to that or sing it together. That'd be a great way to finish tonight's study, if you have time. See you next week.